So welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be able to host today's workshop, which will be all about FabLabs that are from difficult places, that are in, have been supporting disaster relief in some way, and or have been set up by organizations that are involved in disaster relief. I'm going to introduce myself briefly. My role is at Field Ready as the innovation lead. I've been attending the FabLab conferences since I think Fab 11 in Boston. The Fab that was 5 years ago, 6 years ago perhaps. If you there was an online event last year as well, and I'm basically going to be chairing today's discussion because the focus here is going to be some of the amazing FabLabs from around the world that not only sort of presenting themselves, but hopefully getting into a bit of a conversation about the challenges they face to sort of get your opinion on what solutions to those challenges they might tackle. So the slides are for the different FabLabs are going to be all about presenting the FabLabs, and then the discussion will be about some of the challenges they faced in setting up FabLabs in difficult places. So we have a number of great speakers today. Thank you all for preparing today's presentation, and I'm going to hand straight over to Nepal, and let me just go on to the Nepal slides. And Pradita, I think this starts with a video, but just let me know when you want to me to move slides. Thanks, everyone. Can you hear the video?
Yeah, it's working for me. Shall I start? Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you start, Pradita? You can narrate the video for us.
Yeah, sure. Well, before starting with the slides, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Pradita Pradhan. Well, my education background is in electronics and communication engineering, and I've also completed my master's in MBA IT. So I'm working as a program manager at Field Ready Nepal, and also working at Nepal's first FabLab as a core team member. So it's really great to be a part of this workshop today. And thank you so much for providing us with this opportunity. Thank you all. So now I think I'll hand it over to Paula, and then I'll get back to the slides. Over to you, Paula. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Namaste. I'm Pallav. I'm a technical lead of FabLab Nepal, a mechanical engineer by degree, and also very near to graduation at the lab. As the lab that I was training, that was Super FabLab Kochi, was impacted by COVID and everything was shifted back. And yes, I would like to share the things I've learned and will be learning a lot through this network of beautiful minds. So going to the introduction of FabLab. So we are a new FabLab. Nepal Humanitarian, in a partnership with Field Ready, have launched the first ever FabLab in Nepal in February 2021, with support from our invaluable donor partners, MIT, the Salt System, Soyworks, and UK8. So FabLab Nepal is aiming to make the space as a kind of a collaborative center for innovation, invention, education, and humanitarian outreach by providing access to knowledge, tools and resources that bring ideas from heads to hands, empowering the people of Nepal, regardless of their gender, social status, abilities, or economic needs. It is first of its kind digital fabrication lab in Nepal, which aims to develop the capacity of humanitarian responders, entrepreneurs, engineers, skilled workers, migrant students, and other private sector players by promoting a kind of local manufacturing as well as design. So next one, previous one. So Field Ready. Field Ready and Nepal Humanitarian had planned on bringing the FabLab to Nepal since starting of the year 2018, after Kathmandu Meet Fair that was organized in 2018. So to understand if if Nepal was ready for the FabLab or not, few meetings were conducted. But Ben Spencer, FabLab Nepal's advisor as of now, said that what if Nepal is already ready? So after that, we conducted some in-person workshops introducing digital fabrication and human-centered design, where we came to know about the students as well as teachers that they were so much interested and have some knowledge on this, but very little or no hands-on experience with these technologies that we have right now. So after that, we conducted a survey regarding people's experience and interest in this field, and also found out that even students or graduates who were in this sector have knowledge in CAD, little knowledge in CAD, but did not have any hands-on knowledge, but have an interest to learn this technology as well. So, and parallelly, we started exploring about the process of bringing the FabLab to Nepal. There were many challenges that we had to face because of the government process, because the political condition of Nepal is not so stable right now. But after a long struggle of entire team for more than a year, sometimes with government processes and sometimes with the COVID restrictions, we were finally able to bring all the equipments to our space in middle of January, middle of January 2021. So challenges include, as I said earlier, bureaucratic system where approval from not single but multiple ministries were needed, as this was a kind of grant. So the machines, all the machines were granted by SolidWorks, so that was another problem. And also some equipments were new to the customs official as well. Though there's a standard EXIM code, EXIM means export import code. They did not know about the machines, so were subjected for higher taxes. So from that, our learning was, and also a recommendation for other countries would be referred to the customs official rather than the agents, because the exact amount which could be great for getting the final figure for the customs. So also for the government approval, one mistake that we did was we tried it all by ourselves. So if the time is short, don't do it all by yourselves, but hire a professional who has the experience with the ministries as well as grant approvals. So after all the equipments arrived, I had to do my Fab Academy, and which was already started. So before that, me with help of Jake Reed from MIT, softboard was assembled and as fast as possible, and I had to leave the country for Fab Academy, and remaining setup for the machines was done by Pradita and team. So to share that, I would like to hand over it to Pradita. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. So while talking about the equipment setup, this particular slide. So after the arrival of the equipment, we started unboxing and slowly started setting up the lab. And it was such a nice experience for us. Normally what happens is that there is a separate installation team that helps with unboxing and setting up the lab. But for us, it was quite different. Due to COVID travel restrictions, MIT helped us label the machines, set it up, and also run various machines all virtually. And we have around 12 hours time difference, but we somehow managed to arrange calls, meetings, and finally, we were able to set up most of the machines and also run them before the launch. Though we were only, a handful of people at the moment at the lab. So yeah, huge thanks to MIT team for their support. As Paula mentioned, setting up the lab has been quite a time-consuming process with all the long government approval processes, but in the end, it has been an amazing experience to be a part of all the processes, right from the beginning to right from the beginning to setting it up all. So while all this was happening, Pallav had to leave, and he left to pursue his Fab Academy course in the Super Fab Lab in Kochi, Kerala, and he literally got back 3 days ago. So welcome back, Pallav. Next slide, please. Yeah. So after the installation of this lab, a launch program for FabLab Nepal was organized on the 18th of February 2021 with a close group of 20 people following the safety guidelines for COVID-19. So guests from various sectors such as government, private, education, entrepreneurs, were invited. So we also ran demo sessions for them, and we were really actually really happy to see their enthusiasm after seeing the lab and the possibilities that comes along. So while we were preparing to bring the lab to Nepal, we were also doing a market study just to understand the hunger of people around digital fabrication. And we got this amazing feedback, which proved that people are actually so hungry for these kind of, technologies. Next slide, please. So yeah, we also did a project previously called Humanitarian Design Challenge, and where we conducted workshops Nepal-wide. And the feedback we got was, yes, there's a lot of theories, but no practical. And students are looking forward to getting hands-on knowledge on various machines. So prior to conducting workshops in digital fabrication, different institutes with different fabrication machines were mapped uh, from different technical institutes in Nepal. And it's really sad to say that the online survey revealed that the digital fabrication equipment is not easily accessible to the students. And with all this feedback and from various market studies and experiences, we started developing content that would help people, students, or let's just say, the enthusiasts to come learn from the machines and also get to work on it. So in the beginning, we started with the machines and knowledge we already had. So that was around, simple like 2D drawing using SolidWorks, 2D CNC cuttings. We used Cricut at the time, and 3D modeling, printing, and also basic electronics. Next slide, please. So the first the first set of workshops were conducted at the end of 2020 as a pilot. But this was the first time that a technical workshop had been conducted virtually. So it was challenging, but not impossible. So we have conducted various workshops. I think it's around we've been able to conduct around 9 to 10 workshops so far, and they were either virtual or were conducted as a hybrid module, but most of it was virtual. So feedback was collected after the completion of each session of the workshops, and the feedback demonstrates that the virtual technical workshop was good on average, and it was a course that the participants would also recommend to others as well. But these feedbacks are also step towards improvement. With all this and COVID restrictions, we have come to a point where I'm really happy to say that not just technical college students, but in fact, business schools have also started recognizing the value of this lab. And for now, to give an immediate example, we've been working with King's College students, so which is a business school, where they come to work on their final projects or theses. And through, though this is just a second batch, we at FabLab help them convert their ideas to products or design, or let's just say, make it tangible. So, and yeah, despite the situation of COVID, despite all these challenges, it feels so nice to see people, students so eager and excited to learn, which also motivates us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pradita, for your presentation. It's great to hear a few themes there. One, that business students are looking to you for help when it comes to establishing businesses. I think that's a theme that's going to be picked up from our colleagues in the Philippines as well. To hear a little bit about some of the challenges of working in a place like Nepal, such a difficult country to work in. Congratulations, Palab, for finishing your academy course and for coming back arriving back into Nepal after your studies. Thank you for that presentation. We're now going to hop to another part of Asia, the Pacific region of Asia. And I'm going to hand over to Charles to tell us about the FabLab network in the Philippines, across the whole of the Philippines. Over to you, Charles.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. As a quick introduction, I'm Charles. I am an industrial designer by profession, but I work with Field Ready as the innovation lead for the Philippines, working on the programs here. But prior to my involvement with Field Ready, I have been part of the first FabLab that was established here in the Philippines, which was in Bohol. That was way back 2014, and it just expanded exponentially, which we have now for about 35 FabLabs all around the country. And these are some of the locations of the FabLabs here in the country. And a little bit of a background on how the whole FabLab movement or the program came into the country was it became a project of the government here. Specifically, it started with the Department of Trade and Industry. It's the government agency that handles the businesses and consumers here in the Philippines. And at the very beginning, they wanted the FabLabs as a way to do product development for some of the designs and products that the agency has been assisting for several years. And they needed that facility to innovate and do product development. So then the FabLab came in as an idea rather than just a facility. It can also be a public space for learning and innovation, not just for the micro, small, and medium and enterprises, but also for students. So the government agency partnered with most of the schools, public schools around the country, and then established a FabLab in almost every region of the country. So my slides would be more about what happened during some of the responses that has happened, that the FabLab, the Philippine FabLab network has been involved last year. And this next slide will show you several pictures of the FabLabs that has been doing a lot of, as I think some of your labs has been doing too, like doing production on PPEs such as face shields, 3D printing, or if not, working on whatever materials that they have, just like the one at the bottom left. Instead of the usual 3D printing and the acetate, they kind of used the other materials that they could possibly have in their locations, because there are some restrictions. There are some challenges of source of materials that we have in every region. Next slide, please. So a lot of these items has been delivered, including the face shield, as I've mentioned, and also the intubation box. And every single FabLab in the country was able to actually do their own production on these things. And the interesting story was that few specific FabLabs has done it at the very beginning, and it inspired other FabLabs to do the same thing too. And mentioning about one of the challenges, which was the logistics and source of material, it was very thoughtful for some of the government agencies that were able to work with the FabLab to provide some of the materials that they need. And we normally we one time posted a result of what the whole network has done, and it gathered a lot of some of the personal individuals that was trying to get involved and offered some of their materials that they have on their hand, some of just personal innovators and people that has their own 3D printers, even private businesses offers either a discount of the materials, but also at the same time, some of them provides it for free. Next slide, please. So we kind of started it when, COVID-19 peaked, when the whole world got this worldwide lockdown last March. And we started for like about 5,600 face shields, and these are just the face shields. And just for a week, we ranked it up to 20,000. And then on the following week, we had twice of that number at 42,000. And the great thing is, as we constantly post these results, we get a lot of feedback on some individuals that wanted to, if they can't provide materials, that they could offer either a specific fund to address specific needs of that Fab Lab while producing some of these items. And as a result, which also links to what the first things that I've done with Field Ready, I was mapping all of the Fab Labs in the Philippines just to get all of that details and contact information. So one of the goal at that time was to create, a single platform, which is a simple Google site, just to add all the specific Fab Labs that has been responding, and how they could contact them directly that are near to where they are or where they live, in terms of either asking a specific item that they might need, or maybe people that would like to offer something to that Fab Lab when they're producing something. Next slide, please. So collectively, and we stopped by May on counting these items because it has actually grown so much. So at this time, mid-May 2020, we've reached about 150,000 items, which now includes face masks, aerosol boxes, and PPE gowns. And these are just the items that are mostly done, but some Fab Labs have also worked with like sanitation, like a sanitation sort of cubicle that you pass through, and they spray you with some sort of sanitary liquid, these kind of things. And right now, these items are not being, well, especially face shields are not being produced anymore, because there are already cheaper alternatives that you could buy for about 15 pesos. That's about 20 cents US dollars. So these are now at least available, but during the peak of COVID, there were, as like the rest of the world, there was a lack of source on this. Next slide, please. So yes, so bottom line, the goal is to do a distributed small scale manufacturing in a humanitarian response landscape. So technically, since not every single area in the Philippines has a lab, so during that time too, we were sharing different designs, and also some of the things that we found with the maker community for some other Fab Labs to be able to work on that. And so this was sort of the goal, that the Fab Labs would be able to assist different communities nearby, and whoever the Fab Lab that's also near to them, that they could work together. That's it for the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. And two very different contexts there. You have Nepal, where we're talking about the country's first Fab Lab, and having to really battle, I guess, against some of the government processes needed for creating the Fab Lab. You needed to create the Fab Lab. To a country where the government was actively supporting the growth of Fab Labs to support local businesses, as Charles has said, and then within educational institutions, but then also trying now to sort of build on top of that network a distributed disaster response system. Both countries are very Both Nepal and the Philippines are very affected by disaster every year. Nepal with earthquakes and glacial bursts and floods, seasonal floods in the monsoons every year. And the Philippines just has all sorts of disasters, volcanoes and conflict and cyclones, of course, earthquakes. So both really important places for the FabLab movement to be able to respond. So thank you to Charles, and we're now going to move over to Derek, who's going to be presenting us his work in Kenya, which is a country that that does face a lot of disasters itself, but also hosts a lot of refugees from neighboring countries. So Derek, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Please allow me to share my screen. I've just done a few modifications on the...
Okay, I'll stop sharing mine, then you should be able to share yours.
Thank you so much. Okay, I hope that's visible.
Very clear. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. So my name is Derek Mugasia. My background is in electrical and electronics engineering. In the past, I have been working at the University of Nairobi, FabLab Nairobi, and then I moved on to help set up a makerspace within the same university. And then after that, I joined the Kenya Red Cross Society to help also set up FabLab, and that's where I am right now within the humanitarian sector. So with what you can see, this is the lab on containers. We've used containers here. This community that we have in Lamu, in the coastal region in general, because this lab is located in the coastal region, we have a community that is very strongly affected with issues to do with drugs and substance abuse. And then there are very major cases when it comes to indoctrination into some of these ideological groups, so terrorism and so on. And we've had some of the youth being recruited into such groups. So within the Lamu County, what we have done as Kenya Red Cross, one is to set up a rehabilitation center. And that's what you can see at the back there in white, to help rehabilitate drug addicts. And then as we go along, we started looking at other ways to empower the general community, particularly youth, because you're also dealing with cases of very low literacy levels and employment, within the country as well. So what we have done is set up FabLab here, and the reason for that is one, to help with productive engagement, because if you have a lot of youth who are not employed and they don't have much of marketable skills, then you have a problem, because that's how you end up with drugs circulating and exchanging hands. So we set up the FabLab to help with productive engagement, so these guys can be kept busy and productively. Whatever they learn, whatever skills they learn, they can be able to use that to create income for themselves. And then there's just general youth empowerment, especially for those who are not very well educated or not very able to get through that. And there's enterprise development, because if you look at the kind of companies, the kind of startups that are within this area, it's more of a rural setup, is to support with that. And then there's generally to help with humanitarian efforts that Kenya Red Cross is trying to do within the country. So this is the first humanitarian FabLab that we have within any Red Cross or Red Crescent or the national societies in different countries. And this now will be able to help with various humanitarian efforts that we are trying to implement in the country. So we set up towards the end of last year, and what you can see as the time when we were trying to get equipment in. and setting up equipment within the facility. It has various containers for different workshops, so like woodwork, metalwork, 3D printing and electronics, laser molding and casting, and so on. So it's quite extensive. We started doing different programs with the youth so that they can understand how to use the facility. The concept is new within this area. The concept of having an innovation space, having a fabrication space, a prototyping space was very new. So we started doing workshops with the community and you know, empower the youth to start understanding that. So like what you can see, some of the youth who wanted to make a rocking chair using wood and threading as a technique that is used a lot in the coastal region. So they started by doing a proof of concept, and then they developed a small, tiny prototype, and eventually we ended up with the actual size chair, which was now made using CNC machine. Sorry, I went very quickly there. Woodwork is something that is done strongly here, very strongly. The community has traditional skills, and these are passed on from generation to generation. They do this by hand. They do carving by hand. They have very beautiful doors. You should see them when you visit Kenya sometime. But woodwork is very strong here. So it's one of the workshops that picked up immediately when we set up the facility, and the youth are able to work on the CNC and develop different things as we continue training them on how to operate this equipment. Then there is metalwork because of the plasma cutter that we also have. The equipment we have is a hybrid. So they're able now to cut metal and to customize that. It's something that not just youth are learning, but also the local enterprises, people who are doing welding and people who are doing carpentry work and so on. And then we started talking about, we've started having conversations about environmental preservation and waste management, especially with regards to the ocean, because we are right next to the ocean. The community is right next to the ocean. So we've been having workshops on upcycling and recycling of waste material, where we would collect waste products and then train the youth on how they can convert that waste. They can add value to the waste material and convert that to something that can be of monetary value to them, and hence setting up enterprises through that kind of effort. So that is something that is ongoing, and we've even started having some of them now doing sculptures out of waste material, which they would pick metal from garages and junkyards, and then they would pick wooden materials from the field as well, and just come and mold things and sculpture things out of them. And that is also bringing in money to their pocket. Then we are also focusing now on STEM programs for children. We're trying to come up with that so that we cover the entire demographic, because access here to some of these technological things is not very, is quite a challenge to most families because of how their economic status for most part. So we're bringing that closer to them, covering both the families that are able to afford and the families that are not able to afford. We try to bring the kids together to an equal level to have access to this. And now we are starting we are continuing again with the waste management program, but now we are starting to talk more about plastic, to mobilize the community, to advocate for better management of plastic so that it doesn't end up into the ocean. So these are some of the activities that we are doing. We are also thinking of ways of making this a bit sustainable, because being located in Lamu, we intend to serve the whole country, of course, but we're starting with Lamu. And for us to reach out more, then we need to empower the youth so that they can do that. Within the Kenya Red Cross, we have a lot of volunteers. So what we've started doing is to bring them in on various workshops from different counties of the country. They come in and then we train them, we empower them, that they go back and implement those trainings within their communities. So what you can see, for example, is a design thinking TOT workshop that we were doing to empower certain youth from volunteers from different counties on how to conduct or facilitate design thinking workshops. Once they go back to the community, they are able now to facilitate the same workshops, but particularly focused on community problems like what Andrew has mentioned on refugee camps and various other communities that we have that may be going through certain challenges or the other. Once they help them through this, the communities will be able to come up with their own solutions. And as a lab, would come in to help them implement these solutions through prototyping and iteration. So these are just in a nutshell, the kind of activities that we've been doing, but not limited to that within the couple of months that we've been operational. Some of the challenges that we have been facing, and I'm hoping that we'll discuss some of them later in detail, are issues to do with access, because if you look at the community and the way the infrastructure that is available, some of them live in very remote areas and have certain challenges. If they need to access the facility, it becomes a problem, especially those that live within different islands, because we have quite a number of islands here. It becomes very expensive for them to access the lab, so they may not be able to do back and forth, which means now as a lab, we need to design ways to go to them. And then there's exposure and knowledge and skills available. So you're trying to teach people about digital fabrication, and when you bring computers in front of them, you realize that they don't know how to type, they don't know how to operate a computer at all. So you have to start from basic digital skills. So there's that, as well as just the whole concept of having a fab lab and how it operates. You have all this fancy equipment to people who are not used to that kind of thing. So when they see it, there's a bit of a shock and intimidation, which now requires very intentional efforts to maintain them within the facility and to have them coming back and over again to work within the facility, because it's a very new concept to them. Then I want to talk about the innovation ecosystem, in the sense that if you're trying to set up a startup, then you have a place to fabricate, which is the lab, but you don't have the rest of the ecosystem that is needed, like suppliers and maybe mentors who can mentor these young fellas on perhaps how to set up businesses and so on, or mentor them on certain specific skills that may not, the lab may not purely focus on or have very extensive expertise on. So that innovation ecosystem is also lacking in rural setup, and it's something that is challenging as a lab at the moment. I would like to stop there so that we have enough time also for. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Derek. And I think you are probably one of the only person I can think of in the whole world that has managed a fab lab in a university and then managed a fab lab in a major humanitarian organization. So it's really good to hear your perspective and the amazing work that you're doing with the Kenyan Red Cross and the Fab Lab there. Thank you for presenting that to us, and also for teeing up some of the discussion we're going to have shortly around the challenges of working in countries like Kenya, where you know, the innovation ecosystem, as you put it, isn't fully developed yet, as you might imagine. So thank you for that. And now I will share my screen again, and we will go over to the Fab Labs from Gaza and Djibouti. But we're going to kick this off with a presentation about the Resilience Collective. And there's a number of Fab Labs on here. And I think I'm handing this over to Jeanmichel, if you're available.
Yes, I am.
Perfect. I know you're also helping to host Fab 16. So thanks for spending the time with us, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for organizing this as well. I just actually updated the slides, so can you just go one forward to make sure that the new ones are there as well? No, it's not. Could you maybe reload, or maybe stop sharing and then reload it, because I added 2 slides, if that's possible. And in the meantime, I'll introduce myself. So I'm not called FabMCU. That's because I'm helping opening the Zoom rooms and stuff like that. I'm Jeanmichel Muller. I'm originally from Holland. I'm currently living in France. I've been in and around FabLabs for over 14 or 15 years now. I work for the Fab Foundation, and I've helped set up FabLabs in, I think, something like 10 different countries. I've worked for Terre des Hommes for a period of time, full-time, on a project we back then called the Humanitarian FabLabs. I didn't really like the name Humanitarian FabLabs because it was too limiting, I felt. And so eventually we actually came up with the name, the Resilience Collective. So I'll present that a little bit, and then I'll go more in depth into one of the labs just to show you some pictures of it and, explain you some of the challenges we have. And the idea of the Resilience Collective is not only worked on by Terre des Hommes, but there are actually multiple organizations that are part of it. So the International Organization for Migration set up a few labs. Derek from Kenya and the Red Cross also joins our meetings and participates in the work we do. We're working with the University of Geneva, especially with a group in there. It's called InZone, who create formal education for refugees. And the Fab Foundation is also part of this. So the facilities that are currently created, and some of these are not really operational anymore. You can see them on the left, and so I did add the wonderful lab in Lamu as well. We just opened a space in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, and Derek has helped us train the person who's going to run that. And we're actually planning additional spaces now in Guinea and in Morocco. And really the idea is to create what we call resilience innovation facilities, which are basically Fab Labs, to help people in these areas, whatever sort of situation that they have. And so these facilities are very similar in the sense that they have often very much the same equipment and the same setup, but they tackle different problems. So the space in Burkina Faso, for instance, is in an artisanal gold mine. So this is a space where youth goes very deep into the ground to try and find gold, and this creates all sorts of extremely dangerous and very, very horrible situations. And so they were really trying to show them a different career path, to show them different options for education, for developing business instead of doing that. In Hungary and in Ukraine, it's much more vocational training and education for people who've been affected by the migration there. So it really depends on the location, what we focus on, but we all use the same equipment that most of you are familiar with that we have in FabLabs. So if you can go to the next slide, Andrew. So this is something we're working on. I just wanted to show you this briefly. This is what we call a theory of change. And we really think that, if we provide these innovative and safe and inclusive spaces, then we can help strengthen life skills and strengthen assets and resources, and eventually help people build more resilience that we see as the capacity to cope, adapt, and transform. So again, we're using digital technology. We're using, laser cutters, CNC mills, 3D printers, but the goal is to help people build a better life for themselves or those around them, to have more opportunity, to have more options, and often just to be in a safe space. So if you can go to the next one, Andrew. So there are basically 4 actions. We're really big on protection and psychosocial well-being. So again, the tools are just a means; they're not the end. The end is really trying to make people feel safe, feel welcome somewhere. And then next to that, we're really working on digital inclusion. So making sure that people not only have access to digital technology, but learn about it the same way that people in here in France or in the US do. And then we're also looking at innovation and entrepreneurship. So those who want to go a bit further in using the machines, we're trying to find ways of helping them create companies or maybe find a job that is in a not dangerous situation. And then we're also working on education and vocational training. So this is something that most FabLabs do in any location, but in many cases our labs are a little bit different because not necessarily everybody is literate. So it's not just teaching them about digital skills, it's also training them in just much more basic skills that we have to include in our curriculum. Okay, so I'm going a bit fast over these because I want to make sure there's time to discuss. So if we can go to the next slide, I just wanted to show you a few pictures of a Fab Lab we set up in Gaza. So most of you know the situation obviously in Gaza, and recently it has deteriorated, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. But we had in Gaza already a space that you see on the left that is basically a safe space for children. So this has existed and has been run by Terre des Hommes for many years. And what we do there is we welcome children. We have activities for them, sports activities, educational activities, just a space where they can play and they can feel safe and at home, because many children in Gaza, they actually are led to work. Many are picking strawberries, actually. It's a thing that a lot of strawberries come from Gaza. But so we're trying to give them different opportunities. And so here we added a little Fab Lab. You can see on the right that the equipment is more rudimentary than in most Fab Labs, but it really allows us to show them digital tools and to start to train them on digital skills. If you can go to the next slide, Andrew. We have just, sort of simple equipment. We don't have the big things that you may find in other Fab Labs, not only because we don't necessarily have the space, but it's also really hard to get those things into Gaza. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but instead of importing things, we have to make things locally. So some things we can get in, like the embroidery machine you see on the left, and things like Arduinos, like you see on the right, little computers. So we can teach children about microcontrollers, we can teach them about programming, making robots. And so what a lot of the workshops around things like domotics and teaching the youth how they can use technology to improve their lives. So if you can go to the next slide, Andrew. So this is actually not in the Fab Lab we set up, but I wanted to show this because a lot of the people there, they actually started making their own equipment. So as you can see, these Prusas, this is a space where they set up a printer farm basically. And as you can see that the main body of these Prusas, they're made out of wood. So they're cut by hand in the beginning, and now they've made a CNC mill, and then the rest of the parts are printed. So this is a really great example of people just using whatever's available locally to build these machines and to then use those machines to improve the other machines that they're building after. So the really grassroots setup that was in the beginning of the RepRaps is really shown here again. And the things they made with these, and you can go to the next slide, Andrew, are actually products that are sadly very necessary in Gaza. At the top, you can see the plastic orange parts at the top are actually tourniquets. So most Thursdays in Gaza, people will go throw stones at the fences, and sadly they get shot. The people on the other side of the fence try and shoot people in the leg, and not necessarily anywhere else, but that's still very dangerous. And so these legs need to be tied off very quickly. And so they print a lot of these tourniquets to stop the bleeding. I'm sorry that this is a little bit, maybe difficult to hear, but this is the reality of the situation. And then at the bottom, you can see actually all sorts of parts for stethoscopes that they print for local hospitals and doctors that work there. So this is equipment that's really necessary. This is not just some group of people that's doing this to have fun or to experiment with 3D printing. These are actually items that are very much needed. So sadly, this space has been completely destroyed by the recent bombings. And so Andrew and I have been trying to work on finding a solution for them. So we're continuing also with the Fab Foundation to discuss how we can maybe try and help get these people back on their feet. But that's a longer story. So these are really spaces that, use technology for doing good and for protecting people. So if you can go to the next slide, I just wanted to show a few images. While I was there, I asked Yusuf, who you can see there in front of the screen, who was one of the people running our Fab Lab, to host a workshop because I wanted to see how that goes. And on the left, there's Sally, which was one of the people also working in the Fab Lab, and she's absolutely wonderful because she started learning about artificial intelligence, and she started teaching the young people there how to program Arduinos using those kind of frameworks. So really, really complex stuff that they just learn by themselves. So if you can go to the next slide, what I liked about the workshop is that eventually we started with a kind of a small group because Yusuf set it up so it wouldn't be too packed in the room, and he started explaining them, CAD and CAM and how different parts of machines move and what that means. And while we were hosting the workshop, other kids were sort of looking through the window of the door and peeking in. And I told Yusuf, dude, just let them in. It's fine. You can let them in. So if you can go to the next slide, Andrew. At the end, the whole room was basically full. We couldn't really move around anymore. But it was really wonderful to see because all these young kids were really engaged and really enthusiastic to hear more about this and learn. And one of the things that happened, I think, really illustrates the importance of this kind of space in these areas is that it's not necessarily about the machines, it's also about the community, because Terre des Hommes has sort of an age range that they work with, and 18 years old is the oldest that they can welcome in their safe spaces. So after that, people are, they're adults, so they're basically not included in the programming. But some of the people who are officially too old to come into the Fab Lab, they kept coming back because they just wanted to learn more. And I was sitting next to some of the younger kids who at a certain point, sadly, were being quite unpleasant with Sally. They were really being rude to her because she was a woman in that context. And one of the older kids stepped in without being aggressive or unkind, and just very gently told the young kids, like, this is not how we treat each other here. This is a space where everybody is welcome and safe. And they calmed down, and it all went in a very, very kind and friendly way. And I really realized that, it's the machines that draw them in, but eventually it creates a community, and it creates, I think, a positive environment for these young people to be able to live in and to thrive in. So another lab of the Resilience Collective that was set up, and I don't know, maybe Enrico, if you want to talk about that, is the lab in Djibouti. And so that's a very, very different context. You can learn about all the labs on the website if you want to go there. And there's stories about all the different labs. So again, they're very much the same in one way and very much different in others. So, we face many challenges, and I look forward to hearing the ideas of others. Enrico, I don't know if you'd like to say a few words about the wonderful lab you helped set up in Djibouti.
Hey, hi. Well, it would be nice to talk about it, but considering the time, maybe just a few words. So the lab has been set up inside the university, and there was a plan for a second lab more in a community space outside of Djibouti. Djibouti is a very small country. I knew about it when I went there briefly for a week to help setting up the lab. And the objective was to support migrants because it's really a country where a lot of people goes through. But sometimes because of a lot of complex situations, they get stuck there and they don't have the money to move on nor to go back. So they end up to stay there longer than expected. And of course, this creates very unstable situations in which people don't access to education, training of any kind. And sometimes there's also some issues with the basic needs, but the lab went very well, thanks mainly to the manager that did a great job. He actually wants to help to set up a lab in a nearby country, and he asked me to do Fab Academy next year, and we should figure out how to give him a scholarship because he really deserves it. But basically, I've been there briefly, so what I noticed is what Derek was saying. Sometimes you have to really start from the basics. And kids are very excited to see what it's actually feasible. So my contribution was very, very little, but I'm happy to hear so many great stories around the world on the topic. I would say it makes more sense maybe to give time to the discussion. What do you think?
Well, thank you, Enrico, for that summary of Djibouti and for you know, the challenges of the Horn of Africa are only going to become more intense. Djibouti is a very small country, and it's in an area that has, at the moment at least, quite unstable neighbors, but it will be very climate affected. So I think it's what you're describing there is similar to perhaps the way that we heard FabLab Nepal was setting up. It's in a difficult context. It's you know, we have the first FabLab manager in the call today. We have Palab, but you're talking about your colleague in Djibouti, you know, getting trained up as a FabLab manager for the first time, and now looking to set up other places. I'd like to thank you, and also Jean-Michel, thank you very much for presenting the Resilience Network and for the FabLab in Gaza. It's an amazing group, and I agree with your sort of your framing of it as being about resilience and community rather than humanitarian FabLab as such. And I think there's that FabLabs are, to me, tools, and they can be used for many things. And the idea that we might see some places as only being about humanitarian relief as opposed to about fun and education and community and all of the other things that people live for is challenging. So thank you for opening your presentation with that. We have a couple of other people on the call. I might actually quickly go to Wael from Beritech in Beirut, and then maybe Lucia, if you're still with us, I might ask you to say a few words about Ethiopia and Malawi. It'll just be a couple of minutes, but I want to take the opportunity of some of the participants we have today to hear a little bit more about FabLabs and disaster relief. And we're 1 year on now from the Beirut port explosion, the blast that took place in Beirut, and people there are still suffering, and Beritech has been responding. So Wael, maybe you can speak to us a little bit about what you've been doing, please.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say that when we started as a FabLab, we weren't targeting just the humanitarian stuff, but life happened, and we live in an area where there are a lot of conflict. So as everyone in this lecture, I guess everyone, we started with the COVID response when COVID happened, and we tried to help the hospitals here locally in Beirut. And after that, the August 4th blast happened, which is the biggest non-nuclear bomb in the world, which almost destroyed like half of our capital in Beirut. So at some point we had to, because we had the machines and we were able to produce stuff, mainly furniture, we decided to launch this project, which was mainly producing furniture that was designed by makers from all over the world. We received designs from designers from all over the FabLab community, from every country in the world. We had some events organized in Peru to design for us some furniture. We had the Wiki Factory who helped us a lot in trying to attract new designs. And we were able to get some funds from Field Ready. And accordingly, we fabricated locally many types of furnitures that were chosen based on the demand needed in the area of the blast. And we weren't that successful. Actually, the project was successful in itself, but unfortunately the blast zone was huge. So as he said, a year passed by now till now, and we've only as in a whole, only 20% of Beirut is reconstructed now of the blast area. So we were able to like fill a small gap of this 20%, and we were able to help like till now around 10 to 15 families probably. We made in total 85 or 82 individual items of furniture that were donated to people that were majorly affected by the blast. And hopefully we always support crisis things, but hopefully we will not meet them in the future. So we are always, we hope that we go back to the normal FabLab life, and we do our normal day-to-day activities. People come to the lab, we do workshops, but still we are always ready to support any type of humanitarian activity or any project with a social impact in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Rael, and thank you for your response to the Beirut blast. Lebanon is an extraordinary country that does a huge amount for its neighbors in terms of hosting refugees. And I know a significant proportion of your population, potentially even as high as 50% of your population, are refugees, and that's an enormous burden for the country. But it just shows what you've been able to do in making furniture, particularly for, as I understand it, the older populations in the port and around the old city, around the port. Just shows some of the the very basic needs, even in such a developed context. So yeah, thank you very much. And what I'm going to ask now is I'm going to ask Lucia, perhaps, if you could say a couple of words since you're with us today about what you've been working on in Ethiopia and in Malawi, please. I know you've been supporting a couple of FabLabs. Sorry to spring this on you, but I thought it'd be nice to hear from you as well as one of our participants today.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So yeah, nice to see familiar faces. For those of you I don't know, I'm a researcher based at the University of Cambridge. So my research looks at how digital fabrication can help to solve humanitarian development challenges. And I've been working these past 18 months or so quite closely with two makerspaces, the BIT makerspace in Bahidar in Ethiopia, and also a second makerspace in Blantyre called 20 that was set up really in the midst of the pandemic. The BIT makerspace, I think it opened just a few months before the pandemic started. Derek, I know, did a lot of work actually with the makerspace, helping to set it up. And with support from the Cambridge Africa Foundation, we worked on some projects to 3D print and laser cut face masks and face shields at both of those spaces. So in each of the spaces, there were over 5,000, 6,000 face shields that were produced and donated to the major hospitals and also sold to local SMEs. And that work is being continued. So now 20 Makerspace is scaling up the production of those face shields with support from GIZ, and also working on quite an exciting project looking at 3D printing of orthopedic braces. And BIT Makerspace is really going from strength to strength as well. So working on another project with Cambridge, looking at the production of a low-cost oxygen concentrator, and also working on projects to develop local agricultural solutions. Since the Makerspace is based in the northern region of Ethiopia, which is very much based on an agricultural economy at the moment. So there's some exciting projects that are going on there. And if anyone wants to hear more about that work, I'd be more than happy to have a chat about it.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Lucia, for stepping in there. I wonder, we have a few other participants. I know, of course, that disasters are an increasingly global phenomenon. So if there's anyone else who would like to make an intervention, please please let me know. But thanks, Lucia, for presenting your work. And I must recommend to you all some of Lucia's research, some of the papers that she's published about making in developing countries in disaster relief contexts and in places with difficult supply chains. Lucia, maybe if I could ask you to share some links in the chat, perhaps, to those. I think everyone here would be interested to see those papers. Okay, so maybe I'll invite everyone now to turn on their cameras if they would like, and we can have a wider discussion about some of the challenges that people are facing. But I'd like to give some of our participants a chance to ask some questions of the speakers today. So please do turn on your cameras, and if anyone has any questions they'd like to start off with, please let me know. Just unmute and ask a question, ask away. Well, if not, let's go to some of the challenges that Derek was raising about the the challenges that he was facing in Kenya. Could you say a little bit more about the first of your challenges there, Derek, please?
Yeah, so one of them is issue of co-design, which I don't think I had expounded on when I talked, but when you look at such areas where you have challenges in, okay, for our case, for example, the lab is far away from certain communities that need it, and you find these communities in islands, almost 50 kilometers away from where you are, with places that have to be accessed by boats. Now, there are challenges with co-design with the community, not just for such, but many other areas where you find there's a project or there's a interest, there's a need somewhere that you need to design for and develop for, but you need to design with the community, perhaps using human-centered approaches and so on. And this issue of the access, the exchange of information, the interactions with the community every so often, whenever this project is going on, is something that becomes expensive and time-consuming because of the distance in between, or where these people are located. So I found that to be one of the issue that when you're trying to co-design with them, it becomes an issue. And right now, with such remote areas, even when you say we will Zoom, like we are doing right now, they'll tell you, no, we can't. We're trying to deal with power issues and so on. So no, we can't Zoom right now. Just organize for us to come to your lab, and then we will perhaps be able to work together on certain designs. So I've found that to be one of the challenges that we're facing here in Lamu.
Thank you. And I think that's yeah, well, let's dive into that one first, if that's okay, Derek. There's always a tension, I think, in disaster relief between the time it takes to engage with the community and the need to respond quickly. And I sometimes remind my colleagues at Field Ready that they should use ready-made designs like the products that Enrico was creating through the careables.org project, to use some of those designs rather than trying to design something from scratch. Because if you're designing something, you're not making something, and if you haven't made something, you're not helping people. And that's the Fab Labs are more about production, more than just being about production. But in Field Ready's case, as a humanitarian organization, we are sort of looking at interventions in the supply chain. Would anyone else like to say how they might have tackled that challenge about engaging, the time it takes to engage with people Enrico, I know you've been working very closely with people on health and care devices.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. As makers, we tend to design too much sometimes, while modifying something existing would be good enough and way more efficient. Also because inside that design, there's not just the shape, or there's a lot of mistakes that people overcome already. So build upon what the other did is definitely useful. Derek, you were in the workshop yesterday, so you know that there's a list of co-design tools that you can pick up from the FabCare network. But the real problem is that if you don't have a connection with the people, then everything becomes very difficult. So we did a masterclass in Open Dot, the lab I'm managing in Milan, with IDEO.org about remote co-design. And there are a bunch of techniques that you can use to do co-design even remotely. The problem is that you need a connection to be able to do so. So if that's not available, I would start from the easier way to communicate with them and build upon that, because the tools can be kind of flexible. So if there's a stable way to communicate via cell phone or something like that, maybe that's the easier way. I really don't know the context, so maybe I'm saying something silly here, so forgive me about that. But if you're interested and if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to have a brainstorming about it. Maybe we come up with some interesting idea.
Yeah, and while we're on the same, Andrew, may I just add, there's also a bit around that where, while we're still talking about co-design, and I'm combining co-design and access, so that you have a situation where I've talked about some of our youth being recruited into ideological groups. Lamu is neighboring Somali. So sometimes this happens, and then you get calls where you have to provide humanitarian assistance to areas that are bordering these guys, where there's conflict between your government and these groups, and you find challenges there that the lab would potentially be able to start brainstorming on and trying to find solutions. But these are also very hostile environments. So while we're still talking about co-designing because of where they are located, there's also just co-designing because of challenges in co-designing because of how hostile the community is, because you can't just walk in there if people don't know you. It becomes another issue as well. Okay.
Absolutely, and maybe I'll before we're going to Nepal to talk about this co-design challenge. I wonder whether, Charles, you're able to say a little bit about some of the more conflict-affected parts of the Philippines. Obviously, Gaza is probably the most conflict-affected place that we've heard about from today, but you might be able to provide a comparison between the FabLabs in the conflict-free parts of the Philippines compared to the places like Mindanao, perhaps. How are the FabLabs there able to engage with the communities? Is it more remote work, or is it direct participation still?
Actually, it depends on the needs at the community, but I think one of the things that the FabLabs in Mindanao has been doing is just some of like the direct participation with these communities. In terms of reaching out, a lot of the communities in Mindanao has always tried to make it more friendly to a lot of their communities. So, but right now, obviously, because of COVID, there's not much that they can do in terms of moving into those conflicted areas. But I've seen some of the FabLabs that are in near those zones that are still working well, and they seem to be still be intact with the community around.
Great, and perhaps Derek, connecting with Charles about hearing more of that case study from Mindanao might be a good thing to do. FabLab and Pradita, a lot of your work in setting up the FabLab has been about reaching out to communities and getting people to come into the FabLab. Have you? But obviously, the FabLab is in Patan, part of Kathmandu, part of the capital city. Have you been able to sort of get out into the field and do co-design processes? Sorry, into the field is aid sector jargon, but into some of the districts outside the capital to engage with people in design processes? And if so, how have you been able to do that? Pretty so, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, talking about that, after the FabLab is established, normally like the people from other colleges or from the community come into the lab, though we have not done after the FabLab was established. But before that, all the equipment related to FabLab about like how it can be used in like local areas were done just before the establishment of FabLab. So after the FabLab was established, there was a COVID lockdown as well. So that was the reason we could not go to different districts. But obviously, in the near future, we'll definitely approach to different areas so that it can be distributed more within Nepal as well. So yeah, talking about that, like people that are getting in our facility, they are like different types, from different areas, expertise, and also like we have been reaching out. Like right now, we are just penetrating the market as well as knowing about the people's like want, as well as like telling people about our lab, what are their capabilities, and also contacting with the local manufacturers so that we can like after the prototyping stage that we're in, we can just pass on that thing to the manufacturing, like mass production as well. So that way we have been focusing. But yeah, talking about the workshops, I think Pradita can like explain more.
So with the workshops, and actually we are getting traction from outside of Bali, but because we are mainly focusing around these digital fabrication, and if it's a software related workshop, that's pretty simple to conduct, and we've been able to conduct a few, and it was we have got really good response about it from it as well. But we are getting messages from outside of Bali, but unfortunately, because of the restrictions again, this COVID restrictions, we've not been able to move out or also invite them to the lab. But then that's something we're looking forward in the near future. Yeah.
Yeah, to add on that one, so we have been contacted by other organizations outside of Nepal to for different humanitarian projects like regarding assistive technologies, as well as for different able people as well. So slowly we are expanding our areas as well as penetrating the community. So hopefully we'll do better soon in the near future.
Thank you. I think the challenges of communication, of safety and security, and of terrain, often the cost of travel, but then operating in the time of COVID as well. All of those are challenges that affect all disaster response programs, not just the FabLabs. So there's we've got some insight there from Enrico. I'm able to to sort of very strongly second what FabLab and Pradita were saying about the types of workshops you do, changing those to be more sort of online orientated, like the software workshops, working with local manufacturers. Charles's networks in Mindanao might be useful. But also at Field Ready, one of the things that we have developed is a sort of a remote tool for assessing broken medical equipment. And we use this in northwestern Syria, where repairs can be where local travel can be very difficult. It's in a conflict zone, and so we've developed a tool for sort of triaging what repairs can be made, what parts can be made, and we'll be publishing that shortly as that project comes to an end. There's another challenge I'd like to raise, which is about making the case for, and amongst all the other uses of FabLabs, making the case for FabLabs in disaster relief and about the evidence involved. And I wonder, Jeanmichel, your network, you've managed to sort of bring in IOM, you've managed to bring in Tedros Hom, and I think perhaps UNOPS at some point as well. Stop me if I'm wrong, but how were they convinced? And then I'll go to Kenya, to Derek to talk about the Kenyan Red Cross. What was it that convinced them? Of, you know, what evidence did you have to convince them that FabLabs have a role to play in disaster relief?
So yeah, this is a very good question, and it's actually something we're actively researching. So Ruta is not here today because of the time difference, but her company Meraki Labs is actually being financed now by Tel des Hommes and the Geneva University to do this kind of research around the Djibouti lab. So what's the actual impact, like how many people are reached and stuff like that. I think the way that the other organizations were convinced is that most of the time these kind of things, the kind of spaces that we're that are being set up, that was already happening. Tel des Hommes already since years and years and years has things that they call safe spaces. IOM has the same. So it's basically adding on a new technological layer to these kind of existing spaces to try and improve the work that is already being done there. And so I think the convincing argument was that these kind of technologies are becoming more and more accessible, and more affordable and easier to use. And that is, it's basically also a test to integrate these in these existing spaces and create new spaces to see what we can do. And I've actually in the beginning raised the question saying like, okay, if the goal is to get young people into our spaces, if the goal is to make them feel safe and happy, why can't we just put like, 10 gaming consoles and we just put a whole bunch of video games and they'll probably have fun. Why do they have to learn to use laser cutters and 3D printers? And I think there the argument is that, video games is fun and it's nice to play, but when you're done with it, it doesn't really actually teach you a new skill. It doesn't really actually give you something that you can take back to your daily life and improve your daily life with. And so there the argument would be that, not just, having fun with these tools and sort of giving them the opportunity to get out of their maybe stressful life for a little bit, but also giving them new life skills, giving them other opportunities. And so I don't have a really good answer to the question. And I really like that you asked it because it's a very important question that we have to continue to work on. I think we need to continue to research that. So what is the actual impact of these kind of spaces in, vulnerable populations, and how can we improve that impact?
And I might come to you after Derek Lucia, since you are a researcher looking at this area. Derek, how did the Kenyan Red Cross decide that the Fab Lab in Lamu was a good idea?
Yeah, for Kenyan Red Cross, the FabLab idea has been like a 5-year-old idea. It's been pushed over and over again until eventually it happened. But it's quite old. It was a dream for a while. The organization changed its strategy in terms of how it addresses disaster approach. Its approach to disaster issues. The idea has been to bring in an innovative approach into the way we are addressing disaster issues, and that mainly has been around empowering the community for resilience, and sustainability of whatever solutions you bring to them. So if you empower them and you enable them to provide their own solutions, then you'll make them better and it will work eventually. How we ended up making sure that it now is planted as a fabrication facility other than an innovation unit, because Kenya Red Cross has an innovation unit on its own. So other than the innovation unit, to ensure that the fabrication space comes up, and particularly in Lamu, there was the rehabilitation center, which had been set up. But then you realize that most of the clients that are being rehabilitated are coming from within Lamu County. And when you look at the success rates of this process, you have guys who are being rehabilitated closer to their home.
So when they go through their rehabilitation process, by the time they are done and they go back to the community, they relapse into drug and substance abuse because they have not changed their old ways of doing things. Their habits are the same. So the idea of setting up the fabrication facility here was to help these guys by providing them with new skills, new hobbies, new experiences, so that while they are within the facility, they are learning new things. By the time they leave and they go back to their communities, they can be able to set up some sort of enterprises. They can be able to start doing different things based on the skills, the hands-on skills they have learned in the facility. And then that will help change their habits. With that, some of them can even relocate, because one of the things that have been proven to work when it comes to drug and substance abuse rehabilitation process is that the change of scenery, the change of environment usually helps people to stick on that narrow road. So if these guys are not changing to go to other towns to continue with their process, then they, if they have to go back home, then they might as well be doing something totally different from what they were doing before, because now that will help them to engage with different people and have their hands occupied for most part.
Yeah, thank you. And I think one of the things I've always been interested in is working out whether FabLabs in disaster-affected communities or communities like this are suffering for those problems might be able to run tool libraries or something to help people get started with their, with machines to use the skills that they've learned into operating their environments. In the case of the Philippines, Charles, if you don't mind me saying, when I've met with the DTI, the main department that's been supporting the FabLab movement, I think it is the fact that disasters are everyday life in the Philippines, and the FabLab should reflect everyday life. And perhaps that's what you're getting at a little bit there as well, Derek, that everyday life happens as well. Lucia, in terms of research supporting making the case for FabLabs and disaster relief, what kind of things have you come across? And then we'll have to leave the discussion for the day, I think. Lucia.
Well, I've done some initial research looking at 3 different makerspaces in Greece that were supporting refugee-affected communities. So looking at how they benefited migrants and refugees and what kind of challenges they were facing. I think this is an area that really needs further research, and it's incredibly challenging to do this, to measure the impact of these spaces. I think, the impact, there are some measures like how many people are visiting the space or how many people get jobs that are somewhat easier to quantify, but then there are these really powerful stories that are very difficult to quantify and to communicate. And one of the things that I like in some of the papers or some of the academic research that I've been doing that I always get pushed back on is, what is different about these humanitarian makerspaces to normal makerspaces? What is the impact of this type of intervention versus another type of humanitarian intervention? And we really don't have the data or the measures yet to be able to do this, to be able to explain this. I believe that there's something really, incredible happening. I think we all agree that these spaces are powerful. And I think this is our next challenge, really, to be able to put the research behind it, to have the evidence to make the case for these spaces.
Absolutely, and I'm going to be advocating for that even just in an hour's time when I'm visiting a university in Bristol here in the UK, who are running the Redistributed Manufacturing and Healthcare Network that's looking at making medical devices in conflict zones. The research track of Fab 16 has had a number of papers where people have, I think there was a session yesterday about the evaluation of the impact of Fab Labs, and that's always a very interesting track. So I can recommend that track to you if you're looking for that kind of work. But I think within this community, we have stories that you've heard today that can help to build that case. Maybe not quantifiable, but certainly excellent qualitative examples. And that what we wanted to try and do today was, to use Lucia's word, to provide this sort of incredible examples of what FabLabs can do in disaster relief. So thank you all very much to our speakers. Thank you for participating. Please do share this recording with your networks. I'm sure that it's the kind of thing that would interest a lot of people. And do keep in touch through the Fab16 community, the live app, and you can contact me at Field Ready if you want to be put in touch with anyone else in the sessions today. Thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of Fab16. Bye for now.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.